How often have you watched the film Braveheart and wondered about its historical accuracy? This question has probably crossed your mind more than once, hasn't it? The film Braveheart, a cinematic masterpiece that has captured the hearts of many since its release, has also sparked a debate as fiery as the battles it portrays. Its popularity and impact are undeniable. The film has been a cultural phenomenon, inspiring countless discussions and influencing our perceptions of history. But here's the catch: there's a swirling controversy that surrounds this beloved film. The bone of contention: its historical accuracy, or rather, the lack of it. Many critics argue that the movie takes significant liberties with history, painting a picture that is, at times, more fiction than fact. But what are these discrepancies? How far does the movie stray from the actual events? Stay tuned as we delve into the thick of it, examining the major differences between the movie Braveheart and actual history. To start, let's address the elephant in the room: William Wallace himself. In the realm of Braveheart, we find a charismatic, idealistic, and ruggedly handsome William Wallace, portrayed by Mel Gibson. We see him as a man of humble beginnings, rising to the occasion to lead a rebellion against the English. He's painted as a symbol of Scottish pride and freedom, with his impassioned speeches and daring exploits. However, historical records present a somewhat different portrait of Wallace. Born into the lesser nobility, not a poor farmer's family as portrayed in the movie, Wallace had a more privileged upbringing than the film would have us believe. Indeed, he likely had a formal education, a fact that makes his strategic prowess in battle less surprising. Then there's the matter of his demeanor. Braveheart's Wallace is shown as a bit of a romantic, a man with a strong moral compass and a deep love for his wife and country. While we can't fully discern the personality of the real Wallace from historical records, he was known to be a fierce and ruthless warrior, unafraid to use brutal tactics to achieve his goals. This paints a more complex picture of Wallace, a man of his time, fighting a ruthless war for Scottish independence. The role of Wallace in the Scottish Rebellion, as depicted in the movie, is also worth noting. Braveheart portrays him as the de facto leader of the rebellion, rallying the Scots to rise against the English. But in reality, Wallace was one of several Scottish leaders in the fight against English rule. His role was significant, no doubt, but perhaps not as solitary and pivotal as the movie suggests. In the end, the movie's portrayal of Wallace, while compelling and cinematic, is a romanticized interpretation of a complex historical figure. Wallace was not just a freedom fighter, but a man of his time, shaped by the brutal realities of medieval warfare and politics. Evidently, the William Wallace we see on screen is dramatically different from the historical figure. Now, let's move on to the battlefield, where Braveheart's historical inaccuracies continue. In the film, we're presented with scenes of intense hand-to-hand combat, with warriors rushing into battle in a chaotic frenzy. Yet, in reality, the warfare of the period was much more strategic and orderly than depicted. The Scots, under the leadership of the real William Wallace, were known for their use of the Schiltron formation, a defensive tactic involving soldiers standing shoulder to shoulder, spears outwards, forming a formidable human hedgehog. This formation was notably absent in the film. The movie also portrays the Scots as a ragtag group, wearing little to no armor, while the English are shown in full plate armor. In fact, during the late 13th and early 14th centuries, both the Scots and English would have worn chainmail, not plate armor. And the Scots, far from being a disorganized mob, would have been a well-drilled fighting force. As for weaponry, Braveheart presents us with an array of Hollywood-style, oversized weapons. The real William Wallace, however, would have used a type of longsword known as a claymore. This isn't to say that the Scots didn't use other weapons. They also wielded axes, maces, and bows. But these were not the giant, unwieldy versions seen in the film. And let's not forget the film's depiction of the Battle of Stirling Bridge. In the movie, there's no bridge in sight. The actual battle was specifically named after the bridge because it played a key role in the Scots' victory. They allowed a portion of the English forces to cross before attacking, effectively splitting the enemy and making them easier to defeat. So, while Braveheart's battle scenes are undoubtedly thrilling, they're a far cry from the real warfare of the period. The tactics, the armor, the weapons, they all reflect a Hollywood vision of medieval combat rather than historical reality. Clearly, the film's depiction of medieval warfare is more Hollywood than history. Next up, we have the romantic subplot involving Princess Isabella. This French princess, portrayed as a fiery and passionate character in the movie Braveheart, certainly adds an intriguing layer of romance and drama to the story. But let's dissect the cinematic portrayal and compare it to the historical records we have about Isabella. In the movie, Isabella is depicted as a young, vibrant woman who falls in love with William Wallace and subsequently plays a pivotal role in the Scottish Rebellion. But if we delve into the annals of history, we find a starkly different narrative. Historical records reveal that Isabella was not even born during the time of Wallace's rebellion. She was born in 1289, some 2 years after Wallace's execution. This makes the romantic subplot between her and Wallace quite impossible. Moving on to her marital status, the movie shows Isabella as the wife of England's Prince Edward II. Indeed, this part is accurate. However, the timing is off. Isabella married Edward in 1302, a good 7 years after Wallace's death. So the film's depiction of a love triangle involving Isabella, Edward, and Wallace is purely fictional. As for the supposed relationship between Wallace and Isabella, there's no historical evidence to support this. As we've already established, Isabella was not even alive during Wallace's lifetime. And even if she were, it is highly unlikely that a Scottish rebel and a French princess would have had any significant interaction, let alone a romantic one. In fact, Isabella was known for her political acumen and diplomatic skills, rather than any supposed romantic escapades. She played a crucial role in the political landscape of her time, but that is a story for another day. So while the movie Braveheart paints a captivating picture of a forbidden love story between a Scottish rebel and a French princess, the historical truth is far less romantic. As we can see, the film's love story is more fiction than fact. Lastly, let's take a look at the political landscape depicted in Braveheart. The movie presents an overly simplified version of Scottish and English politics of the time. It paints Scotland as a unified nation under the leadership of William Wallace. However, during the late 13th and early 14th centuries, Scotland was far from unified. It was a patchwork of rival clans, each with their own allegiances and agendas. Wallace was indeed a significant figure, but he was just one among many leaders who were vying for control. Braveheart also tends to depict the English as universally villainous, led by the nefarious King Edward I. While it's true that Edward did invade Scotland and was known for his ruthless tactics, the film overlooks the complexities of his reign. His actions were not solely driven by a desire for power and control, but were also influenced by political, economic, and religious factors. The alliances and rivalities portrayed in the movie are another aspect that diverges from historical fact. The film shows the Scots united against the English, but in reality, there were Scottish nobles who sided with the English for various reasons, including political advantage and personal gain. Likewise, not all English were in favour of the war against Scotland. There was significant opposition within England to Edward's aggressive policies. Furthermore, the power dynamics in the movie are skewed. The film gives the impression that Wallace was the undisputed leader of Scotland's resistance against the English. However, in actuality, his influence was limited, and his tenure as Guardian of Scotland was brief. Other figures, such as Robert the Bruce, played a more significant role in the long-term struggle for Scottish independence. The portrayal of politics in Braveheart is a classic case of history being simplified for the sake of a compelling narrative. The complexities of the period, the shifting alliances, the internal divisions within both Scotland and England are all glossed over to create a clear-cut story of heroes and villains. Once again, the film's depiction of politics is a far cry from the historical reality. In conclusion, it's clear that Braveheart takes many liberties with history. The character of the legendary William Wallace is significantly embellished for cinematic appeal, with his portrayal as a commoner turned knight being more fiction than fact. The battle tactics too diverge dramatically from historical records. The film's depiction of hand-to-hand combat and the use of kilts in the 13th century are more Hollywood than Holyrood. Then we have the love interest, a romantic subplot that might tug at our heartstrings but is largely a work of fiction. History offers no evidence of a secret affair between Wallace and Isabella of France. The political landscape as well is somewhat distorted in the film. The complexities of Scottish nobility and English rule are often oversimplified or misrepresented for the sake of drama. While Braveheart remains a cinematic classic, it's important to separate its compelling storytelling from the historical truths it often bends or breaks.